like to call this regular meeting of the Madison Elementary School Board to order. Ms. Humphries, please call the roll.
President Holcomb.
Here.
Vice President Gresham.
Here.
Member Causey.
Here.
Member Spear.
Here.
Member Thompson.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you. Ms. Andrews, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That brings us to the adoption of the agenda. Does any member of staff or the board have any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Ms. Causey, seconded by Ms. Thompson. Please vote. That passes unanimously. That brings us to item 3, executive session if needed. Is there any need for an executive session? Seeing none, that takes us to category number 4, communications and announcements. Dr. Guerin, you want to start this off?
Yes, I would like to introduce Miss Anna Andrews, who is going to lead us in our presentation for recognitions.
Is Jason Pienkowski the last one here?
Okay. All right. The You Make the Difference and Shining Star Awards are presented by the by the Madison District Classroom Teachers Association and Madison administration to recognize the certified and classified staff who truly demonstrate Madison's vision of inspiring passion for learning and leading in an ever-changing world. And our first You Make the Difference Award recipient is Crystal DePede. Crystal DePede is genuinely a collaborative teacher. Crystal is the grade level leader for second grade, is a mentor to new teachers, and serves on many committees. Crystal is always willing to get involved and lend a hand when needed. Crystal volunteered to serve as a student council advisor. She has embraced the traditional instruction and curriculum and instruction methods. Crystal is involved in helping MTA focus on fidelity to its curriculum, as that is part of MTA's goals in SIAP. Crystal serves the entire MTA community as acting administrator when the principal and assistant principal are off campus for meetings. You will often hear from Ms. DePede's students how much they enjoy being in her class. You can see that reflected in how they meet the expectations academically and through MTA's character program, Character Counts. Thank you, Mrs. DePede.
So I'm losing my voice, sorry. My mom and my dad are here, and I'm so special because I have so many students that are here today. I see Ashby and Kyle and Valera and Kenley, and I think that's all, and I see some siblings as well. So thank you so much for everybody being here. Sorry about my voice.
All right, our first Shining Star Award recipient is Aubrey Hansen. Aubrey is always going beyond the call of duty. She works with our social worker and AP to get a donor's choose together to support our whole school. She works with PBIS and is on many committees. When asked to help our MTA community understand ruler, she is there to help. When our PTO had its annual bingo night, she was there to support her students. The students were so thrilled to see her and her family there. She is open to listening to the needs of her students and teachers. Aubrey worked hard to make new mood meters for our K-4 classes to which the students can better relate. Our students' social and emotional needs are being met because of our amazing Mrs. Hanson. She is truly a dedicated counselor and a genuine person. We are lucky to have Aubrey Hanson. She truly is a shining star.
Thank you so much. This is really special. I'm a product of Madison Schools, so it's really nice to be back and to be able to work in a community that meant so much to me. So thank you. Yes, so I have some of my amazing coworkers, and I have my husband Colton and my son Kiowa, who's giving a little commentary, if you guys can hear him.
And tonight's second Shining Star Award recipient is Stacy Wilson. Stacy Wilson, our Shining Star, began her career at Rose Lane as an outstanding member of our noon duty team. She has since grown into an amazing paraprofessional who supports our students with exceptionalities. Stacy is able to keep a calm and level head in all situations and help de-escalate students who are dysregulated and need assistance. She takes the initiative to find strategies that are effective for the students she works with. Stacy is always collaborative with all staff members and readily implements given recommendations. She has such an incredible rapport with our kids and actively seeks out ways she can support others. She goes above and beyond to build relationships with the staff and students she works with. Stacy actively seeks feedback in order to improve her performance. Stacy is always willing to provide extra support to the cafeteria at lunchtime, adding support to the kindergarten students while they are enjoying lunch. During early release days, she helps prepare materials for kindergarten teachers. Stacy's sense of humor helps alleviate tension during difficult situations with staff and students. She sets high and clear, attainable expectations for her students to reach their full potential. Stacy has a lasting and positive presence around campus and has built relationships with many students across campus, beyond those she works with directly. She loves Rose Lane and is vigilant about our students' safety. We are so proud of our shining star, Stacy Wilson.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, contrary to popular belief, I'm very shy, so I'm a little nervous. I have always wanted to work where I'm at and with the type of children that I work with, and I would not have gotten this far or been as well as I have been if it wasn't for all the staff and Rose and all of them encouraging me and helping me. So I really appreciate the staff that I work with.
That brings us to item 4.2, the superintendent's report. Dr. Guerin, if you want to wait a minute, we have sort of a bustle going on out here. Feel like it's something I said. I mean,
Something I'm going to.
yeah.
Good evening, President Holcomb, Vice President Gresham, governing board members, cabinet, and guests. Thank you to everyone who participated in our Winter Awards recognition event before the board meeting. It was wonderful to have the opportunity to recognize our student athletes and who won their division championships, and also recognize the award-winning staff members who worked so hard and put in the extra time to write grants for more resources for our students. We have so much to celebrate in Madison. It's really fun to be a part of all those things. Also, thank you to the MTA choir. Amazing talent, wonderful job. I wanted to start hula dancing, but I restrained myself. Mr. Giordano is so talented and enthusiastic about what he does, so it's great to see his performance with his amazing students. The Interfaith Breakfast is coming up this Thursday, February 23rd at 8 a.m. at the Madison Center for the Arts. This is an event that we've had in the past that we lost a little bit during COVID, so we're trying to get the group back together again. And so if you know anyone in the faith-based community that might be interested, please call the district office and ask for Danielle. We are working on getting the most up-to-date names with our faith-based community. We like to partner with them to help with volunteering and working for the mutual benefit of our community together. I do have some sad news to share about a retired staff member, Deborah Recker, who worked as our lead librarian for many, many years. She recently passed away. But I wanted to let you know that in lieu of flowers, her family is asking that any donations be given to our Madison Library to honor all the work she did for those years. So it is a tremendous honor to be remembered in that way, to remember her legacy, her life, and her work. And I know she trained so many current librarians and media techs that are serving our students today. On a happier note, this is so exciting. Adriana Lopez has been named the Arizona State Social Worker of the Year. Out of all the social workers in the state of Arizona, the School Social Worker Association of Arizona has named Adriana Lopez their recipient for this year's award, and we could not be prouder. So when you see her, I know you got to shake her hand this evening, please be sure to give her congratulations, because that is a tremendous honor. That is all I have this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Guerin. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to just say how wonderful it was to be at the awards ceremony today, to see all those students who put so much into competing in athletics, to recognize those teachers and other award recipients for this year. It was lovely to be able to do that. I also think it's great that we're able to get back to normal a little bit more and have the interfaith breakfast later this week, and happy to be doing that. Dr. Guerin, Danielle, and I attended a ASBA Bolts training just a couple weeks ago, had a lot of interesting information presented, and I wanted to thank them for the opportunity to go to that. It was nice to spend some time together. And also want to thank you for the continued visits to schools. We're going to be visiting a few schools this week in conjunction with the superintendent's visit. So very pleased to be able to do that. That's all I have.
Ms. Guzzi.
I just want to congratulate Adriana Lopez. What an incredible honor to be the best of the best. I would really love to learn a little bit more about what made her, qualify for such an extraordinary honor. So I don't know if you could share that in the weekly update, but that would be really lovely, because I'd like to congratulate her, but in a way that's very personal, so we can acknowledge some of her outstanding achievements that clearly are the reason she was named. I'm really curious about whether there's a fork here. Just wanted to note that. Oh, you have one too. It's not just me.
Coming up later.
And then finally, I just wanted to say that it was thrilling to see the middle school choir perform here from MTA. Would love to see choirs at all of our middle schools. I will tell you, choirs, because I mean, I'm a little biased. I'm executive director of Advanced Boys Choir, but I know that the benefits of choir are way beyond just the musical. There's a social, emotional, and there's certainly an academic connection. So, just a little bit of a push out there for loving. We would love to see more of that, especially choir programs and band programs in all of our middle schools. Thank you.
Ms. Spear.
Thank you. I wanted to also congratulate all of the recipients of the athletic awards and also our awards for staff. And I also wanted to point out something that I noticed, which is that many of our art and music teachers have been here for a very long time. I remember interviewing Ms. Thibodeau when I was running a bond campaign, and it would have been in about 2007. And it's extraordinary for these teachers to continue doing what they do. And I just wanted to express my appreciation and thanks for all of our teachers for continuing to do what they do. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Gresham.
Thank you. We have a lot going on, so I had to write everything down. Let's see, we had, last week, Mr. Holcomb and I were at the student performance of Giselle at the Madison, which was really cool. The students get to ask them questions beforehand. They get to see some behind-the-scenes stuff. So that was really cool. And I think they asked how many of the students had been to a ballet before. I think all of them, it was their first time, almost all of them. So that was really special. I also went to the #1 choir, had their concert last week. It was history of African American music, so that was really special, and they did a great job. So thank you for doing that. And let's see. Monday I went to the School Board Association Day at the Capitol. So they had some presentations, they had some legislators there. They also always do a student panel, which is really cool. They do from all over the state, the rural, the tribal nations, and it's really good to hear from the students and get their perspectives. So I was happy to be able to do that. This week I'll be joining Ms. Thompson and Dr. Guerin on some site visits, so I always like to do those. And I'm sure Mr. Holcomb will talk about Ray on My Mind this weekend. I do have tickets, so I'm excited to do that. Lastly, I do want to also congratulate Ms. Lopez. That is a huge honor. And I will just say that I know it's been in the news with some about, having funding for counselors and things like that. And I will just say that for all our families and community members, that we will always prioritize our students' mental health and continue to make sure we have our counselors and social workers and all that. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we would follow up on that award of having this best social worker in the state. That is quite an honor, but all of our social workers, we hear repeatedly how important they are, not only to the mental and emotional health of our kids, but the success of our schools. I mean, there's a direct relationship there, and so we're very glad that we're getting at that level quality. I also will sing the praises of being in choir. That is huge. It has been a huge part of my family, my life and my family's life. The commitment that Madison has to the arts, I think, is hugely important. And yes, there is a great show going to be at the Madison this weekend, Ray on My Mind, tickets to that. And I'm very interested to see what the master class for that one will be like. I actually had the honor of one time actually seeing Ray Charles in concert. And it was a phenomenal experience. So I'm very much looking forward to that music. And with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is our consent agenda. And any member of staff or the board want to pull anything off of the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Thompson, seconded by Ms. Gresham. Please vote. That passes unanimously. That brings us now to calls to the public. Ms. Humphries, do we have any calls to the public? Having no calls to the public, that brings us up to the information items. Item 7.1, strategic planning update. Dr. Guerin.
President Holcomb, Vice President Gresham, Governing Board members, Cabinet, and guests. I'm absolutely thrilled to bring our finalized strategic plan for your consideration this evening. As you know, Madison began the strategic planning process pre-COVID, and the committee, which was made up of many stakeholders, staff, administrators, community representative, parents, worked tirelessly, but there were some stops and starts because of COVID. So as I joined the organization July 1st, there was a sense of urgency to finalize the strategic plan because there was so much important work that we were already doing that we knew was going to be articulated in the plan. So it was just going to help us focus on what's important and how to get there and have a vision for the future. So both Ms. Marshall and Mr. Piankowski is going to help me present this evening. We're going to do a brief history and talk about each component of the plan, which I know you're all familiar with, but just putting the whole package together. And then more importantly, what's new is how we're going to measure our work and define our progress. So I'd like to first turn it over to Ms. Marshall to get us started.
Thank you, Dr. Guerin, governing board members, members of cabinet. As Dr. Guerin shared, this process did start in 2019. One of the things about Madison District is just that future-focused approach that it's always had. For example, the signature programs, which have become ubiquitous across public schools now, but at the time was very new and something that set Madison apart. And so we're always looking for those things that can really help our students have that competitive edge. As we worked with the design team, the group of stakeholders that Dr. Guerin shared, we really wanted to focus not just on the core academics that any school would provide, but also those interpersonal skills, the critical and innovative thinking that's going to give our students that competitive edge as they're looking in the job market. A lot of skills can be taught in the job market, but those interpersonal skills and that innovative thinking is something that we want to instill in our students from a young age. So we worked with the design team and we were able to develop a lot of starts and stops due to the pandemic, but we were able to develop the vision, the mission, and the core values and behaviors for the district. And I think it was great that we were able to at least finish this part with the stakeholders, because setting that vision with people who are impacted by that vision was really important. And then making sure we had that mission for the schools. And you saw some of that in the strategic or the school integrated action plans as the principals have now aligned their school improvement plans to the district strategic plan. The core values and behaviors just kind of shape who we are as an employee group and give us that common language working forward. And then the goal areas that were developed and the commitments, we settled on 4 areas. And as I mentioned, obviously the first priority of a school is to educate students. And so having that future-focused learning as a goal area was really important. But you'll see that it was not just learning, but those learning experiences that the stakeholder group really settled on. The wordsmithing was so important to the people that were involved in this because they knew this is a public document and this is a document that will guide our work over the next several years. And then you can see the components that go into having that future-focused learning, that trust-based culture where we do have risk-taking, excuse me, and innovation, not just with our students, but we want our staff members to feel that comfort level as well to try new things that may make a difference. Of course, the readiness skills that students need, and then the more we can involve the students in their own learning goals, the more engaged they will be. And then, as I shared earlier, just those transversal competencies of really leveraging the interpersonal skills, the critical thinking skills that will help give our students an advantage. And then goal area 2 was the inclusivity and wellness. We heard so much tonight in having a social worker of the year, the important role that our social workers and counselors play with our students and staff, and you can see then the commitments that we have there, promoting that social and emotional learning throughout the day. It's not just an isolated skill that's taught, but really teaching the students how to balance that social and emotional and the challenges that they're going through so that they can focus on their learning. We're hearing a lot more about the trauma-informed, just being informed of those traumas that students have gone through. Even as adults, if we look at the list, most of us would probably say that we've experienced one or two of those areas and the impact that it does make, and just being aware of that and how we can work with students for that. And then, of course, we want that climate, not just of the emotional safety, but that physical safety as well, and having those safety committees so that we are have a place where our students feel emotionally safe, but also physically safe to come. And then just all of the interactions that our students have, just that we're responding with dignity, clarity, and respect to those. And I know every year the board approves the discipline matrix and how we're really trying to approach that skill building with our students. And then our next goal area is the community strength, and we certainly know how important that is in Madison and what a strength that does bring to our district. And so we wanted to nurture that culture that values those positive relationships. We mentioned earlier about getting that interfaith breakfast back up and running and things like that that really bring the community in. So increasing that participation in our family education programs, supporting those learning opportunities through our business and educational partnerships. We heard again tonight the grants that our teachers are out there seeking and the partnerships that we're getting that way. Expanding the opportunities for our stakeholders to really be involved and increasing that community advocacy for the Madison School District as well as public education as a whole, and how important our Madison advocates are. And then coming from the award celebration, and then Scott Holcomb mentioned earlier the performance this weekend, just ensuring that that Madison Center is a community asset and remains a community asset for us. And then goal area 4, how do we make that all happen? By directing our resources. And so really optimizing those resources, which start with our highly trained staff. So recruiting them, retaining that staff, and then directing those resources to the priority areas of need. Board Member Gresham mentioned earlier about the need for that social emotional wellness and prioritizing having the social workers and counselors regardless of where the safety grant goes. Leveraging non-monetary resources. We know it's not just money, but other resources that can really make a difference. And then pursuing the funding and the community partnership to really help strengthen Madison. So all of that was developed with the stakeholder groups, start and stop due to the pandemic, but really great involvement from the community, from the parents, from board members, from staff members. It was administrators, it was classroom teachers, it was classified staff, really coming together and having input on that. And that allowed us to have the framework to go to the next steps. And so I'll turn it over to Mr. Pankowski, who will explain that.
President Holcomb, members of the board, Dr. Guerin, and members of executive or cabinet, thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I'll be discussing the next step of that process that we moved on to, thinking about all of the commitments and goal areas that Ms. Marshall just reviewed, as well as the vision and the mission. One thing that came out of those discussions was creating a little bit of a priority list and thinking about how all those commitments are related together and what are those overarching themes that we're seeing between those commitments and goal areas. So we organized some different stakeholder groups to process that information and identify strategic initiatives. Those groups came up with these 5 strategic initiatives to help us create some more focus on what our actions and activities are going to be going forward. And the way we helped set up those theories of actions, we went through and identified the commitments, the goal areas, the behaviors, the core values, and we created these theories of actions to help articulate and communicate to all of our stakeholders, the public, teachers, administrators, educators, community members, what those meant. And we created these theories of actions to loosely follow a format of if, then, so that. If we do this, then this will happen, so that adults can do this and students will gain this. And so that's the mentality we went into in creating those theories of actions. And those theories of actions are meant to just create that logical reasoning thought to explain why we're doing things. So it just increases communication and helps people understand the relationship between different activities that we are engaged in. So I'll go a little bit further into these 5 theories of actions that we identified for these strategic initiatives. The first one being multi-tiered system of support. That was one that was really woven all throughout our plan. And for some people, this may be a new term, multi-tiered system of support. Oftentimes you may hear the acronym MTSS, but the utilization of that framework was viewed as a priority by those different groups because of how grand and encompassing it is. But it really helps us, as Ms. Marshall alluded to before, prioritize learning experiences and focusing on what those different learning experiences are going to be, not just in academic, but also in social and emotional endeavors. And so it aligns grandly with our mission to focus success for all through dynamic, engaging, and relevant learning experiences, focus on students' academic, social, and emotional growth. Thinking about their Tier 1 experiences, the experiences that all students will receive, their Tier 2, which are support situations, and then Tier 3, which are intensive situations where students really need strong support to help them move along. And so when thinking about that, the multi-tiered system of support strategic initiative is really woven into a lot of the other ones that we're going to be talking about too. And so we'll move along to the next one, which is workplace culture, which is certainly one that was at that time was identified. Sorry about that. I forgot I was driving. Workplace code, backseat driver maybe. I was. My apologies. Workplace culture. And so one thing I think about with workplace culture is I love coming to work because I work with really great people. And so that always helps make things better because I come to work and there's people who inspire me to think about things differently to help make things better for all the different groups of people that I work with. And so workplace culture was viewed as something as an important endeavor. Adult satisfaction, engagement, and connections lead to continuity. Continuity increases the likelihood of effective systematic programs for students. And so focusing on that workplace culture in our current employment situation was definitely a well-intended or a great outcome that came from these discussions. And this workplace culture also overlaps with MTSS and how we go about doing things and solving problems. Another strategic initiative that was identified and was alluded to earlier was family and community partnerships, and thinking about how that has traditionally been a very significant strategy to help increase student outcomes, help make connections between our families and our communities and our school systems. It's a proven strategy that has a high statistical effect size when we review educational research, and it was constantly reiterated during our recent school improvement conversations when we went around, spoke with teachers, spoke with students, spoke with different administrative leadership groups when they talked about trying to look at different avenues to build family connections and find out how people were comfortable engaging now and creating different opportunities for further engagement, but then also thinking about those strong community relationships that we needed to talk about. And so that's also going to be an important strategic initiative for for our groups. The next one focuses, and which is also woven throughout our commitments and core areas and behaviors, is equitable, inclusive, and safe environments. And when we think about equitable, we think about fair and impartial environments where all members have abilities to participate. We think about inclusive, making sure that everybody has the ability to participate in our environments. For example, students who are in the special education program, who have individual educational plans, are we providing them opportunities to be included in interactions with their peers and have access to those environments so that they have that inclusive environment? And then also safe environments, which can fall on two ends as far as physical safety as well as emotional safety. And so that was another one that was articulated by the group as being a priority. And we felt that it was important to move forward with that framework, or that lens of looking at things. And then finally, thinking about the last strategic initiative being wellness programs. This one's also a little bit more focused on adults, and it's about providing adults with those with the ability to have engage in different services that would help them in their daily activities, whether it would be medical support situations, through benefit programs, whether it would be through counseling situations, whether it be through all the different things that we provide for staff to help them engage in their employment activities and the benefits of being in the Madison educational system. And so this is another pathway along with workplace culture to help create staff retention, knowing that the longer we keep people in our system and the happier the better our outcomes will be for our students. And so in thinking about that, what happened with those strategic initiatives is that we moved on to say, all right, here is our overarching areas of focus that we're going to move forward with. What are some of the outcomes that are going to happen, some of the key performance indicators that are going to happen if we're focusing on these strategic initiatives? And that'll move us on to the strategic or key performance indicator conversation, which Dr. Guerin will lead.
Thank you, Mr. Piankowski. So one of my mentors always said, and he actually had it written on his whiteboard, how are the students and how do we know? And along those same lines, you could ask yourself, how is the staff and how do we know? Do we have community trust? What do the families think of our schools? So when we design key performance indicators, we need to be confident in our data, and we need to be able to answer these questions to make sure that these initiatives that really encompass all of the commitments and goal areas, are we doing what we want to do and say what we want to do and make sure that we're getting there? It's not just happenstance. So we had so much discussion around these because there's so many different ways to measure things, and you can do so much measuring that you spend all your time on measuring and not actually doing. But our work needs to be informed, and it needs to be informed more than once a year and needs to be informed regularly. And because we have such a talented Ed Services department along with technology, we're talking about automating some of these things, creating some type of data dashboard where we can have, our systems, like our student information system, regularly feed this information to us. So first, a satisfaction survey can encompass several stakeholder groups. We're partnering with Hanover Research, and when you have a group or a firm that does a lot of surveying, they can really help you with question confidence and make sure you're not leading someone with the survey question. We're going to be looking at workplace culture. We know that it is so competitive right now. Dr. Lomeley likes to say that we're not going to hire our way out of this situation, that we have to retain as well as recruit. I quote her all the time on that. And so workplace culture, we need to know how the staff is doing, what makes them excited to come to work, what is a roadblock, what are some minor things that we can take out of their way that will make their job satisfaction increase and make it easier to meet the needs of the students. We can also ask about equity, inclusivity. When I think about safety, it's not only staff and students, it's parent awareness of our safety plans and confidence in what we're going to do. And if they get that letter that there was a threat at their school, do they know, in fact, the steps that we take to get there and they feel good about that and that when they kiss their student goodbye at the drop-off lane, they feel good about sending their student to school. Wellness of our employees is really just looking into our future and how to sustain employment, and really just show our employees that we care. And professional development is absolutely critical. Really noticed the disruption of the pandemic and how we have to work to get our skills back, and that the students' skills and needs are not the same. So all of this is going to lead to specific survey questions. Some survey questions will every group will get, and some will be specific for groups. I want to be very clear that any student survey would be with explicit parent permission, just like we recently did the focus groups, and one of Ms. Thompson's little ones was in our focus group, which was great, one of my favorite things that we did. But we'll look at school, grade span, parent, staff groups, and student groups to really have an understanding of people's perceptions about the work we do and how we can better meet their needs. Another key performance indicator, of course, is at the heart of what we do, student achievement. So we will look at the rate of students demonstrating achievement and growth outcomes. So we don't just look at growth, we also look at proficiency. We have to have both, and they have to be going hand in hand, because we certainly want to get growth out of students, but how far away are they from proficiency? We need to bridge that gap. So we'll be looking at both of those. We have some nationally normed outstanding measures like NWEA that we in this district, which is such a benefit, and I'm so grateful to have come into a district that has that level of assessment performance that informs instruction. We'll be looking at this by school and by grade level. We always know that there's dips when we talk about going from elementary to middle and preparing our middle schoolers to for high school, so we have to look at the focus in on those areas. We'll also look at our subgroups. How are students performing by gender, ethnicity, program enrollment, and also our targeted school improvement subgroups. Arizona Department of Education, along with the federal government, helps us identify through our testing different subgroups that could be performing better, and we focus on how to improve those subgroups. So, of course, this is at the heart of what we do, and we will continue to ensure that all of this work is informing our instruction, and that on TCT Wednesdays, the teachers are digging into readily available, easily accessible data to inform their instruction right then and right now. That's our goal, and that's where we want to get. Another key performance indicator is the magnitude of participation, the voice at the table events. So when you look at a school, do they have a balance of well-attended academic family events and social events? You don't want just one or the other, right? You want to have a combination. When we have committees, like developing the strategic plan, or when we're choosing another administrator, do we have different voices at the table? Is everyone represented? Sometimes you get in the habit of the same people volunteer all the time, and we want to make sure we have broad representation. And then we have district and site committee groups where we need parent and community participation. So all of these, it's important that we don't become really just infiltrated and focused on we have to just branch out and make sure that we're hearing from everyone. This is so important right now. I keep saying that. Everyone is important. That's why we've chosen them. But for a key performance indicator, our student enrollment. We understand that public education in Arizona continues to change, and now with the addition of the Empowerment Scholarship, it is yet changing and evolving again. So we need to track our enrollment. We need to look at not only our capture rate from within our district, which means the students that live in our boundaries that attend the Madison schools, but we also need to look at the students that we are pulling in from open enrollment. over 50% open enrollment, where are those students coming from? We need to look at different grade level trends, school trends. Are there opportunities in some schools to raise enrollment and market those programs? We look at ethnicity and by gender, and I already mentioned open enrollment. We are working with a demographer, which we've done in the past, and when I looked at our prior demographer report, it was before COVID, and we are clearly off track on what was predicted. That is not surprising at all. So we're running the numbers again with Rick Brammer, but we're also asking very specific questions, not general, just general questions, to get the information that we need to work with Jacqueline's department to focus on targeted, specific marketing and making sure that we're capturing the students and that we're retaining the families we have. We also need to talk to families that are in programs, and occasionally we'll hear some challenges, and if we don't address those challenges, we'll have students move on to a competitor, and we want them to stay in the Madison family. And we talked about the recruitment and retention of employees, how some of our newer staff did not have typical student teaching experiences or even student intern experiences. So we may have to prepare them in different ways through Barb's department with our instructional coaches and mentors who are just universally respected and appreciated, which is wonderful. But we'll work with Dr. Lomali's office to get information from ASPAA survey, which is an Arizona statewide survey that provides us information about hiring and capture rates. We also like to look at the position types, the rate of contracted positions. When we can't fill our own position and we have to contract out with a different company, the chances of a turnover, not as close a tie to Madison, to absolutely honor the work of the contracted people, but it just does sometimes lead to less retention. And also the rate of our hard to fill positions. I have really noticed that our special ed positions we have been able to fill in Madison, and I've been other places where that has not been the case. We need to make sure we continue to work at that. And then Dr. Lomali likes to look at the first day of school vacancies and to see, because they work so fast and furious in August and July to get those positions filled. So we will be watching all of this, comparing our work to work of other Arizona schools. We know Madison is a place people want to work, and that we see that current sitting principals are applying for our principalship, so that shows that is true. But we have to work harder at this than we ever have before, because when you look at the universities, people are just not going into education like they do. And the last key performance indicator is looking at our wellness programs. Are we offering preventative health opportunities? We've had the mom van, we've had the you can check your skin for skin cancer and get an overall, there's all these things that we keep bringing in to honor employees' time and to incentivize preventative measures. We have an employee assistance program, and we offer retirement planning. So to continue to take these wellness programs to the next level, our Zen rooms when people need a moment, all of these things show employees that we care about them, we value them, and we want them to stay in Madison. So we have now come up with a new acronym. So everybody get ready to learn. MAT, Madison Action Teams. Who is going to do this work? Well, the work has already started. We said that, we took a little bit to finish the strategic plan, so the work started, but we will have 5 stakeholder groups that will lead this work and report regularly to us. I also recently talked to President Holcomb about having the vice president potentially be the strategic plan liaison for the board, just like we do with some other areas of importance, like the Madison Foundation. So if that would be agreeable, we would love Vice President Gresham to have just a closer look in hand in all this work, because it is so very important. So these teams are forming as we speak and will help provide focus and direction and report back, and the KPIs will guide the work. So that is what we have for you this evening. We're happy to answer any questions.
Questions and comments. Ms. Kazi.
Thank you. What a great report. And so it's so exciting because, we were all, most of us were all at tables back in January and February and March of 2019. And then everything came grinding to a halt. And I think we were all, we'd created so much enthusiasm, and we're so thrilled with the mission, vision, values that have been, and agreements and behaviors. And so to see this finally move to where it needs to be next, to like implementation, is really so wonderful. So thank you everyone for all your amazing and wonderful work on this. I have a few questions in regards to a few of the focus areas. The first is for the family and community partnerships. Question, so it seems that the City of Phoenix, even though they have no specific role in public education, always, the mayor always wants to do something in those regards. And I've always, having worked a little bit in the social services side, specifically with homeless families, I've always seen that there's a lot of disconnect between, everybody has services, but there's not a lot of coordination. And I'm sure our social workers are often finding that they're having to reinvent the wheel and finding the resources. And when we hire a new social worker who maybe hasn't been here in Phoenix to do that, they have to do the same thing. So I'm curious if, with a connection to Phoenix Union and the feeder school, K-8 feeder schools, if there's a opportunity for us to approach the City of Phoenix and ask them for better coordination. They have their family service centers, as well as coordination they do with all the time with providers. Obviously, there's a lot of effort being made now into providing additional housing, which our families are facing all the time. So I'm just curious if there is a way that we could find out if that is a possibility, because we know that things are happening, but they are never coordinated. And I know in the homeless community alone, there is very little coordination, even though we have a hotline, and that is probably the best example, and that hotline doesn't always work that great. So just want to throw that out. I know that is a big idea and project, but the potential for the benefits to our families, and also to allow our social workers to be able to do other things than having to hunt down all the resources, because we have some coordination of that, I think would be really fabulous. But I don't know. So that's one question. Two question is, Mary Lou Fulton School of Education, ASU, is doing a next education workforce team that's focusing on new models of instruction in order to focus on retention. And I'm curious if we engage with them. What are your thoughts on that process? Because the conversations they're having are really relevant. I mean, we know teachers, first through third year, they get in their classrooms and they are isolated. And the conversation they're having is really addressing that issue. So I'm curious if what your thoughts are on that, and if there's a connection to what our goals are as well. And that's all I have.
So for the first,
I know.
I'll take the first question and then I'll pass the second question to Dr. Lomeli. So I love that idea. And now that so many of us do have social workers and counselors from the grants, and I am a part of the Phoenix Union Superintendent Collaborative, I could really see some synergy there. So that's a great idea. We can absolutely explore that. And then I'm going to pass the next one off to Dr. Lomeli.
Thank you, Dr. Guerin. Mr. President, members of the board, cabinet, I have looked into the research for that next generation workforce. And the foundation of that is to create scheduling teams so that teachers don't feel isolated, especially the new teachers. So I have looked into that, and I think that's a big project. I think we've talked about it a little bit, but we can keep exploring that. It would deal with scheduling at the school level to create teams of teachers responsible for groups of students. But it's very interesting, and I know ASU is really working to get us to think differently about how we do staffing. So.
Great, thank you so much.
Mr. Gresham, I saw you first, and then next. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for this great presentation. I was able to come in on the tail end of our planning of this when I first joined the board, and it was a huge group. Actually, we had a lot of stakeholders in there, so it was a very good collaborative process. I have a question on slide 15, if we can go back. I love that we're going to do some of this segmentation and look at these different categories. I just have a quick question about, and of course, I'm happy to be the board liaison for this. So, because you know, strategic planning is great, but you have to follow up, obviously, and so I'll be happy to do that. So for these subgroups, the program enrollment, does that just refer to like our special programs? So like the STEAM and the arts and the, is that what
So,
we mean by that?
and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also gifted special education, English language learning, as well as we'll also look at specialty program enrollment.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Spear.
I'm having a hard time coming up with a specific question because there's so much. I just wanted to compliment you and everyone who worked on this. I was lucky enough to be part of the inception stage of this, and so it is especially rewarding to see the sort of genesis and the implementation of it, and so that it is not something that just sits on a shelf, which is what happens in so many organizations with strategic planning. And so I'm thrilled to see that there are outcomes that are being sought through data. And to that end, I'm really grateful that a lot of the initial concerns that drove some of the strategic planning have really been addressed and have not fallen by the wayside or somehow gotten watered down. Like, for instance, enrollment, making sure that we know exactly who's coming to us and why, and who's leaving, who's staying. That's so important, and it changes over time. I mean, at one point, Heights had enrollment so low it was going to close. And so, I mean, these things change. I mean, we used to lose girls in particular to ASA and at the middle school juncture. And so it's really great that we are continuing to zero in on that piece specifically and allow our marketing team to really drive come up with some strategies to make sure that we're addressing them. And so I just wanted to point that one particular thing out, and also the voice at the table. For so long, a lot of our organizations, our PTOs and some of the parent groups became the same 10 people. And what it did is it alienated some of our very, very informed and connected and other parents. And so I'm really glad to see the voice at the table comment, which I believe was on one of the big giant white boards that we talked about way back in 2019, has not been lost. Diversity is the spice of life, and we are all the sum of our parts, and I have been saying that for 10 years, and I really do believe that, and I'm grateful that a lot of those original ideas are here, and again, hats off to Mr. Piantowski and everybody who has worked so hard on this.
Ms. Thompson.
First, I just want to say this is really fantastic. It's really great work, and I think that there are the right things are being measured. You know, as you said, Dr. Guerin, you know, you're asking the question of how people are doing, but how do you know that you're doing that? And I think that you've hit many of the indicators that are so important. One thing I wanted to raise was, you know, one of the comments earlier we heard was that we're very future focused in our thinking in the district. And we hear time and again, we have people who attended these schools and they come back to work here. And I think it would be interesting, I know that there's some data that I think ABOR uses and the Helios Education Foundation uses that talks about high school graduation rates and also post-secondary enrollment rates, because those things are impacted by what happens in our K-8 classrooms. And it'd be great to know what those are, because I have a feeling we hit those out of the park with our students. But I think it says something. We don't have all that control once they go on to high school or whatever post-secondary institution they enroll in later. And it's obviously a far-off indicator, but I think it says something about the quality of our institutions. It might be handy to have that information as well.
So, Board Member Thompson, I had the opportunity to visit the Helios data room. It's got Decision Center. I knew it had a fancy name. And right now they only have high school data. They're working very hard to get down to middle school. But I think it would be a great field trip to visualize how our students are doing, you know, post Madison. They're doing some great work down there.
Are we able to track that because of, can we track them on their SACE number, or is that, is that possible? We could do that?
That we can't do it, but there are
Right, they can
there are
make- yeah.
data agreements with Helios, with ASU, with the Board of Regents
Wow.
that track that information, and they have that longitudinal data that they're trying to build further down, so they can interconnect everything from third grade reading performance all the way through post-secondary.
So we could have
enrollment
high
years
school
later.
graduation rates for Madison graduates,
We
potentially.
could potentially do that, depending on where they are in building
said
it.
that
And I work
the-
with those people for a long time.
Middle
so if
school
there's
is-
anything that I can do in helping, I'm
Absolutely. And Ms. Thompson, you said it perfectly, that they're breaking down those barriers when we can't get others to share data. They're doing all that for us.
This is phenomenal. I've been involved in strategic planning in a number of organizations and here for multiple strategic plans. This is by far the most professional, the most focused, the most, I think, workable strategic plan that we've had. That's not just, well, we want to do this, cherry picking things out. The important, but before I go talking about that more, for those who are watching or for the staff and the board, I've just been listening to this conversation. The level of professionalism that has been coming from the staff and the detail and the focus of what you guys presented is phenomenal. But hopefully you were also listening to what my fellow board members were saying. Yeah, Barb, but not only that as an action plan, but one of the things, and our community needs to know this, one of the things that is so strong about Madison is the level of engagement, the professionalism, the knowledge base that the board has. Other than one old fart on the board, there's a very professional, knowledgeable group, and they help counterbalance me. But it is really impressive. You don't hear that conversation at any level in other organizations, and it was just phenomenal for me just listening to the board's discussion together with the professionals that we have. Now, with that being said, the strategic plan is very good. It's the implementation that is always the problem. And I would like to see, as we go here, really specific, and this is part of what the involvement for the board member too, how we measure not only the individual parts of the strategic plan, but how that's integrated. I mean, one of the simple things we used to do, and I'd like to see that, when we have things coming forward to the board and presented, we should say specifically where those fit into the strategic plan. From my perspective, if something comes forward, it should be able to fit in within our strategic plan, because if it doesn't, and it may not be what we need to be doing. And if it does, but it doesn't fit within our strategic plan, then we need to look at the strategic plan. I mean, those two things interact. So I'd really like to see that and that integrated as we go in the performance, because I think what you have here is very good. A couple of things I really like to focus on culture, because I'm a strong believer that you have to develop culture at the employee level, at the student level, at the family level, because if you don't have that culture, whatever plans you try to have implemented will fail. And they have to be supported by the culture, not just standalone. I did hear the comment about scheduling. One of the things that I've actually talked to Dr. Guerin about this, but looking a lot of focus on scheduling across all the schools. I mean, we have had one of the things that I think has been sometimes lax or caused problems is we haven't had that coordination of scheduling, or there have been holes in the scheduling that happens. And we looked at the scheduling, not only being able to, for our teacher implementation, that too, but also for implementation of the strategic plan. I mean, you brought in now, being able to do some of the things. Focus on scheduling. I think we need to take that broader look at scheduling. It's not just what kids are in what classroom or how many teachers we have, but also how does it inform our strategic plan. I would like some answer, and maybe Dr. Guerin, you can decide who does. There's a lot of focus in the strategic plan about the social and emotional side, the wellness of the kids. There's an attack upon that is currently happening. That is contrary to having proper discipline and proper control within schools. And I'd like you to take a moment, if you could, and address how that's exactly opposite. That is part of discipline and having controls in schools. And Dr. Guerin, I hope you could respond to that.
Absolutely, President Holcomb. We know, just like in medicine, so much is preventative. So if we support students, if we're very clear about our expectations. I was just in cabinet today with Principal Webb. We were talking about, what does the school need? And she was articulating that sometimes having that adult go sit in that classroom with a student that is struggling to prevent the behavior when you know that they need some additional support causes the behavior not to even happen. So it is that layers of what students need when they need it, which can be different, which is different for every kid. That's why we talk about the triangle, that 85% of the students will be will perform great with just the typical school expectations, rules, clear direction from the teacher, all of those character supports. About 15% are going to need more than that. So that's why we have our trained staff, social workers, classroom teachers to understand what students need, to give that little bit of extra. My son was someone that needed that little bit of extra, and he was so successful with caring adults, and I will be forever grateful. And then that tier 3 behavior support is when kids need some intensive one-on-one or even an individual behavior plan. So providing those social emotional supports to students as a preventative measure doesn't mean we're not going to have to discipline. You receive suspension reports every week. We have our behavior matrix. It's in our student handbook. That's not our first choice. That doesn't mean we don't do it. We have to run safe and orderly schools, and all of the students and the teachers and the staff in those buildings deserve that. They deserve to have their learning not be disrupted. That doesn't mean you can't have both. And sometimes in other places, that pendulum swings one way or the other, and that's why social emotional learning sometimes gets a bad rap, because they don't have that balance. Some people might think, oh, well, that means we don't discipline. That doesn't mean it at all. It means that we focus on meeting students from where they're at and being preventative and supporting them, so in the hopes that we don't have to have discipline. We all know that you can just write a bunch of referrals and keep cycling through those referrals. And when I used to have lunch detention, when I was a teacher, it was the same kids in the lunch detention every week. So was lunch detention really working? So it is a balance with discipline and providing students what they need. Some people get off track in doing one or the other. We have a nice balance here in Madison. Did I miss anything, Principal Webb?
And the last thing, just on a personal note, I take it as a personal victory that the word cultivate got put into there. Those who have been involved in this process, they know, just like I was a pain in the ass about we have STEAM schools instead of STEM. The word cultivate, being from Iowa, I had to get the word cultivate in there, and I'm very happy that it got in there. So are there other questions, comments, anything more for Dr. Guerin or Ms. Marshall, Mr. Piankowski? Anything else in response to what the board has said?
I just want to thank the incredible leadership of Cabinet, and specifically Ms. Marshall and Mr. Piankowski, who took such a leadership role in getting this done. So my many thanks.
You are released. You may go. That brings us to the related topic, or 7.2, the literacy update. Dr. Guerin.
President Holcomb, Vice President Gresham, members of the board and cabinet, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Marshall. There's been so many changes with the science of reading and much regulation and requirements. We felt it was really important to bring this topic to you. Ms. Marshall.
Thank you, President Holcomb, members of the governing board, and members of cabinet. In alignment with the strategic plan commitment in future-focused learning to develop readiness skills necessary to function in an increasingly interconnected and multicultural world. Tonight, we do want to share a literacy update. Certainly, as parents and as educators, we know the importance of literacy, especially the early childhood through third grade. The state of Arizona does have legislation that guides us, and then through the Arizona State Board of Education, as well as the Department of Education, those resources and how that legislation should be enacted. So tonight, Dr. Michelle Wilson, who is our Executive Director for Curriculum and Instruction, will overview the legislation, the science of reading, and how we're implementing things in Madison, as well as answering that ever important question of why you have a fork at your plate tonight. Dr. Wilson.
Well, good evening. President Holcomb, Vice President Gresham, members of the board, Superintendent Guerin, executive team, and esteemed guests, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about literacy this evening. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce Andrea Mateen as well. Andrea is our English language arts literacy coach here in the district. She helped prepare this presentation, and she promised she'd help me with any really hard questions that might come tonight. So thank you, Andrea. This evening, we're going to take a minute and start by just going over the objectives of the presentation and why you have the fork. So first tonight, Ms. Marshall already talked a little bit about it. We're going to review the legislation, which really has been over 10 years. It's hard to believe for Mauer. We've been in a 10-year process of legislation from the beginning, but we'll talk about the screening, we'll talk about the required universal literacy, new certification requirements, and then where we're at as a district as a result of that today, which I know is really at the heart of things. And then the vocabulary, that's why you have the fork. So we've got all this terminology, and we've heard some of it already in the strategic plan tonight, so keep a tally mark, because whoever has the most of these vocabulary words tonight gets the cake. Oh yes, and it's for anybody can have the cake. So see it, check them all, look at them all here, and I'm going to use like Mauer and move on when reading, universal literacy. I'll use every single one of these tonight, so make sure we're ready. We ready? Okay, here we go. So 2013, that's where we really entered this first legislation. We were already teaching reading, right? We were already teaching writing. We knew this, but of course, we entered the legislation, which established the requirements for passing assessments, so that's what most people know about Mauer. They know that you have to meet the assessment requirements to move on from third grade. And a lot of people, it stops there. But we're going to tonight talk through all 4 pieces of legislation. And of course, if anything happens with our third graders, we of course keep them here with us in the summertime. We make sure they show proficiency, and we have them prepared to go on to 4th grade. But right on the heels of that came the next piece of legislation, which establishes that screening process, which in our district we use the Fast Bridge assessment. And it also established a timeline for a literacy block. So we talked about scheduling just a few minutes ago, but we've got to have a 90-minute block of literacy. It's established, it must happen, and also requirements for what has to happen in that 90-minute block as part of the instructional day. In a minute, I'll show you how our kids are doing as well on that, our Fast Bridge assessment. Next thing that happens is the requirement for a DTD. Ooh, that's hard. So I'm just going to call it the universal literacy, or the person on each campus. And that's so that we have somebody designated on the campus to help with literacy. And Andrea has been instrumental in being sure that our universal literacy people are well prepared. And then this summer, the very last piece of legislation. That last piece established that our teachers, anybody who teaches literacy, for K-5. That could be a resource teacher, that could be a reading specialist, that can be a reading interventionist. Anybody in K-5 who teaches literacy needs this endorsement, and before the endorsement, 90 hours of explicit training. So here we are to from 2013 to 2023. So first piece of legislation, after obviously the requirements, are really all of us giving this fast bridge assessment and then reporting to parents about the kids and their progress. So perhaps as board members or as a principal or as any of us, you heard about like the letter that went home from the fast bridge screening. Well, that letter, we'd been sending it, but this year the state said, well, we really want it in very specific language. And that language was kind of strong, where we had to tell parents about the progress on the assessment. So right now, in law, we give the assessment in October, in February, and then again at the end of the year. And this is what the assessment tests with the fast bridge. In general, with our older kids, it's given computerized with some adult assistance, and the younger you are, you have somebody face-to-face assess you. Here's our students' progress this year as it was reported in the Move On When Reading State portal. We report as a district, and then we report as each individual school site. This is the district view. You can see the fall on the top, and then you can see the winter at the bottom. So you can see the number of students we assessed, how our students, what percent are at benchmark, what students are approaching, and which ones are significantly at risk. I'm going to show it to you again on the next slide in a bar chart for those of you who like this view. If you take a minute here, you can see kindergarten and kindergarten again, that's fall, and then winter. So for the students that are in gray and the students that are in red, those students are receiving that response to intervention that we've been talking about in the strategic plan. So they may be receiving it from their classroom teacher, or they may be receiving it from a reading specialist, or a combination thereof on their campus. It just gives us a chance to see where we're at and what's being reported. And then again, we'll give the fast bridge assessment again in June. The next piece of legislation is about this dyslexia person or universal literacy designee that we need to have at each site. And each site is required to have one person on their campus to support questions and to be very well trained on literacy. And we were using PDX, that was the training that was available, but we have moved to really the very top science of reading training at the recommendation of the Arizona Department of Education. So currently they're attending with our site administrators Lexia Letters. That really is the gold standard training on the science of reading. And you can see that each one of our sites is well above the required number of people on campus to help answer questions, support anybody on campus with their literacy needs. And Andrea works directly with these universal literacy staff to ensure that their sites support. So, and you can also see Community Ed joined this. They're not required to, they elected to join this. So we're well above this legislative requirement, and we're in the gold standard training this year. And I really want to give a shout out here to the finance department behind the scenes. I know I just can't say enough. They really helped us get across the bar so that we could get into Lexia Letters. It was a big lift, and I just want to say thank you. Also here, for the K-5 literacy endorsement planning, this is the very last piece. This came out this summer. I don't know if everybody was aware that every K-5 teacher who's teaching literacy now is by 2028 will need to hold this endorsement. Unless you already hold a reading endorsement. But even if you hold a reading endorsement, I'm going to make the case that this training is spectacular. The Lexia Letter training that we're in is teaching things to every single person that I speak to that's currently taking it or has taken it has said, I thought I knew everything there was about reading, and I'm going to give you a preview of it, but there's something new that I can learn that can help me to intervene to be a better instructor. So it's really about the very current science of reading. So in the end, our teachers will be exposed starting next fall. It's a 2-year process to 90 hours of instruction For teaching reading. We'll do this partially inside of TCT, mostly inside of it, with a few days where they require some full days of training. And we have that scheduled and we have that schedule already built. And then at the end of the 2 years, they'll sit for the Foundation of Reading assessment. That's a Pearson assessment. The first time you sit for it, there is no charge. And we really believe that if you fully attend Lexia, according to our information from ADE, our staff will be very well prepared for this assessment. So we just wanted to kind of give these pieces of the updates, just where we've been and where we're at today with the last piece of legislation. Looking at what's inside of letters, this is Scarborough's rope. Many of you may have already had a background in Scarborough's rope. This is what you get in letters. So many of us have a background like in phonological awareness or maybe in vocabulary, but these are all the elements that we need for a skilled reader. And this is what our administrators are getting right now this spring, and this is what our teachers will get over 2 years. And Letters is a course that is made up into 8 units. So these are the 8 units that our teachers will get 1 through 4 next year. And then the following year, they'll get 5 through 8. So, and that's the rope embedded into all of these different 8 units. One more view of this, just because I wanted to just give the overview of everything that you get. If you look down the left, this is really what universal literacy is. On the left are all the components of literacy instruction. And then across the top, that's the system of language. So when our teachers are all done and we're working to do interventions with our students, because you think about that FastBridge chart, I was reading your body language, and I was like, none of us like to see any kid that's significantly at risk, not any moment, not any day. These give us the skills to have less and less students, and let's someday say never, none. There's a 0. This is where we get our skills to do the interventions, more and more skills. So of course, that's why we want to engage in this training starting next fall. And our administrators were in it now. Another critical piece of Move On When Reading that all schools, each school enters their plan, is that we show under the Every Student Succeeds Act, under ESSA, is that we have a strong Tier 2 that has a top ESSA rating. We use Wonders. It has the best ESSA rating. In the fall, we're going to roll out Wonders 2023, and our teachers, we already have our training planned. We're going to start our first training in April, so we'll be ready to go with that, and another one on August 4th. That's our in-service day. It's also a requirement in here that all of our schools use a common Tier 2 and Tier 3 top ESSA-rated product. That doesn't mean, let's say hypothetically, somebody loves to use some of the FastBridge products. Those are great products. You don't have to abandon them. It's just as a district, we have to have one that has a top ESSA rating. I'm leading in our, well, Ashley and I and Andrea were ready to go, but lovely Ashley's moved to Park, which we're thrilled about. So we're going to start in just a week to go out after we meet in ILT on the 27th. We're going to go out for RFP for Tier 2 and Tier 3. We need a common product there. So that is a to-do before the year is done for us to get this finished. If a campus has something, I want to be clear, they're not going to abandon something that they're already using, but we'll have universal products in that space. So we're closing out. Of course, we'll finish inputting our data for each one of our sites in the Mauer portal. That is a data portal, a very, very comprehensive data portal for each one of our schools. And for the district, we'll do our parent notifications, or if any are needed. We'll finish our training with our administrators and letters this spring, and then we'll start our launch of Wonders, and we'll get that RFP done for Tier 2 and Tier 3. Those are critical pieces to get finished. And then for the fall, we'll start right back again, but we'll launch our teachers into letters. We'll get Wonders 23 up and running. We'll do any parent notifications that are needed, and we'll continue to prepare to make this a really, really strong cycle moving into the fall. I want to really thank you for the opportunity to give an update on a topic I could really talk for 4 hours on. And I tried to keep it at 8 minutes because I know it's getting late. Who has the most tallies? Let's see.
I was busy listening.
Listening. You have 11?
Of course.
Well, I actually have some really good news because I have cake for everybody. So I'm going to give the cake to Danielle and stand for questions. How's that? Danielle knows there's a box
Ms.
of
Kazi.
cake for everybody. I'm happy to, I'd love to stand for questions.
Yeah. Oh. So Wonders 23, can you explain how it's either connected or how Lexia letters, inform some of Wonders 23? I'd like to know if there's any connections between the two or it's just, I know we've adopted Wonders, so obviously we're moving on to the next one, but is there some recognition? Because obviously this is what Arizona has legislated. I assume this is happening across the country. So I assume it's affecting Pearson and all the big manufacturers of curriculum. So I'd love to know how this science of literacy is then now being embedded in the curriculum that we're going to implement.
So,
oh, thank you.
For Wonders 2023, I went back to Scarborough's rope. Wonders 2020, to get the highest ESSA rating, you have to show evidence of all of the elements of the rope inside of your literacy program. So they've designed the 90-minute instruction over the 90 minutes of the day and then over the week. And in that instructional model, and they also have to show evidence that kids have shown a lot of progress on their product over time to get this research-based top rating. So I'm trying to give a short answer to
a big question.
Yeah, a big question. And then you can feel free to come up if you want to answer more to it, because I think Andrea's already formulated a response. But when I asked them a very similar question, like, why you? Why you in this space? Because there are other vendors. They showed me their research. And also when I asked ADE, where to head and what are there products we should steer towards and products we should steer away from in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. ADE was very favorable towards Wonders. Was there anything you'd add to that, Andrea?
Lexia Letters is not a curriculum. It's just,
Right.
It's a framework that can be utilized in all curriculums. So no matter what curriculum or resources the teachers have, they can implement the practices that they're going to learn within Letters with any resource that they have. And Wonders, McGraw-Hill Wonders, they have dug deep into the science of reading and started implementing it into their newest update, which is 2023.
Thank you.
No problem.
You don't have to leave.
Ms. Thompson.
It's been a while since I've dove into mower, and this is going to give me flashbacks tonight, so thanks a lot. I had a quick question on the presentation. When we're looking at those kids who are at risk, first of all, I think the standard still falls far below for children to be held back in third grade, so I have two questions. One, I'd like to know the data about the number of students, not just who are at risk, but the students who in our district are eligible or end up. Actually, I'd like to know how many are held back in third grade. I know there's retesting opportunities or kids who have an opportunity to do summer school and get up to speed. But one of the things that was always concerning to me about this particular legislation was there's such a focus through third grade, and those kids who struggle, even if they barely pass and get by, are still going to struggle in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So I'd also like to understand better what we as a district do in order to support those students once they get past this, the law and move on when reading. So the two-part question.
Yeah, thank you. to respond to the number historically, and Jason's here, but we're already talking about and planning for this summer. Do you want to respond?
The trigger for the Move On When Reading retention is a subset of minimally proficient, and typically we might have between 3 and 8 students who identify in that area. Some of them are excluded because of their IEPs or their English language learner need. So typically we might have 2 or 3 students engage in that that have various different learning opportunities like summer school opportunities or different support throughout the year, or tracking based on other results that we've obtained during the year to say that although they did perform low, we think we can still scaffold things forward for them in their next year and keep track of them as they roll over into the 4th grade year.
But I want to give a caveat, because I thought Andrea brought up a good point that we've been processing, that this is the year of the 3rd graders who were, home. So we've been thinking about that and planning differently for that. So for the interventions, we've been in a different, I think I got it, but unless you would, but we've been planning differently for that. We're concerned the number could potentially be a little bit higher, and that the summer intervention might need to be a little more intense. So I'm just giving the caveat because I don't want to be misleading. Like, just because our number has been consistently in one spot, we've been meeting and discussing the data and the progress of these, especially these students that are in the low red, for pretty much since we got the low red scores, because we can see, if you're staying in the low red and not moving. But I can tell you the sites are working incredibly hard. And to your second part of your question, for what we do in 4th grade, we'll have our Tier 2 and Tier 3 product with even greater fidelity and more training. But the sites were already doing our response to intervention.
I really appreciate that because 2 things. First of all, my kiddos, my twins, are in 3rd grade, so I know them and their peers have struggled in different ways, and I've seen it in our classrooms. I've seen how our fantastic teachers are supporting those students and getting them over the hump, because you learn to read up until 3rd grade, and then you read to learn, and it's so incredibly important. So I deeply appreciate that, and I also appreciate the fact that not just the hard work that our teachers are doing up until 3rd grade, but they're still continuing to support those kiddos once they get into upper grades, because those struggles are so real for those students, and sometimes can put them, even one of my own kids, put them in a box where they don't think they're that successful because they're struggling with reading. But man, when that light bulb goes off, it's incredible to see.
Ms. Spear.
Thank you so much. And just to follow up on something Ms. Thompson said, is it still true that academic identity is set by the time they're in 3rd grade? Is that still an accurate statement? It was floated when my kids were in the younger grades. And so to that point, I think it's really important that we identify the kids that are struggling, not just through data, but also a lot of kids can memorize. My own child was that kid and fell through the cracks because she was able to memorize and mimic enough to get past, but she couldn't read. And so it just, and so now to see the processes that we have in place to help students like her, it's a world of difference, and I'm really glad to see that. I did have one random question, and it's from slide 8, and it's regarding the cost of the new teaching certificate, how it is not currently waived for teachers. What is the cost on that?
When I called ADE, and correct Dr. Lomely, I thought it was around $60.
Okay. And then how much is the test if they are not able to pass the test this first time for free? How much is the test?
I thought it was $130 or $150. It's
very pricey. I just want, I had a feeling, because I know how expensive those exams are, and I just want to make a point for anyone who is watching, and just for posterity's sake, I suppose, that these are costs that our teachers have to take on, and we are not provided budget to cover this for teachers. So this mandate that has been created, this by legislation, does not, it is actually putting costs on teachers, and I just want to make that point. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have a question about just the implementation of the plan for Madison. What happens when so you're going 2 years, this is, if I understood it correctly, the program is going over 2 years. So how are we dealing with new teachers that come in, or teachers that are not new but are coming in from other districts who haven't gone through that? So how are you cycling them in as well?
So Andrea and I have been working on this. We also have teachers who are cycled in from other districts who have already had a year of letters. So we've kind of got the whole, really every scenario, to be frank. And it's possible that we could hire in all different work groups people who are going to need ongoing training with this. So what we've put together, we literally have a logistics plan for people who have no training in all different work groups. We've got different logistics pages that show people who have a background, new people who have no background, people who are going to start at this date, in this group that are going to be running, and we just have ongoing sheets showing and budgets running that are showing how we'll run all these different groups over time, because we want to ensure that we are hitting the mark and have our teams prepared by 2028, and we've put them in the best position possible to teach and ensure that they've got exposure to this great quality teacher preparation, and they're ready to pass the assessment. So the sooner, we know we need to get out the gates right away in the fall, and then we've got to have a recursive plan moving. So we have a logistics page running now, and we started with administrators this December, and we'll hit the ground. We are hitting the ground in August.
Yes, I can see you biting, you're just ready to jump up there. I counted 4 times she started to stand up and sit down, stand up and sit. She was waiting for you to take a breath.
So Letters does not provide like a trainer of trainers that other vendors do, but they do provide a facilitator training that is out there in the public. So once teachers and myself go through units 1 through 4, that'd be next year, then we can open it up. Hopefully we have a budget for it to say who would like to become a facilitator. And then that's how we plan on sustaining this practice here in Madison for years to come. This legislation is not just Arizona, it's nationally. So the teacher colleges are making note of that, and they are starting to implement their literacy instruction within their colleges. So those teachers will have to pass the test too when they graduate, and then they'll have the same learning. It might not be letters, but it's the same practices that we're teaching.
Okay, and because you said a lot of this would be embedded in the TCT, and so when they're TCT, if a teacher's not at the same place as the TCT that's scheduled for that, they have their own IEP, basically? Okay.
And the one thing we didn't share is that right now we're all taking it, but it's digitally presented. So if I miss something, I can log on and watch it. And if I can only watch for 10 minutes, and then it just restarts again, and I watch the next 20 minutes. So that's the other good part. Not all of it's digital, but a lot of it is partially. It's a hybrid type of training. So some of it's unequivocally in person, but some of it's digital. So you can get caught up there.
Yeah, and some follow-up on about what after 3rd grade. Are we going to be doing this training beyond the 3rd grade teachers as well, particularly 4th grade, because they're going to have to be working to do the catch-up?
K-5.
It's a K-5.
It's a K-5 training. It's a K-5 legislative requirement, and it's a K-5 training.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments, questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
That brings us to our solitary action item for this evening, 8.1, Encore Elective Course Materials. Dr. Guerin.
President Holcomb, members of the board, I will once again pass it on to Ms. Marshall.
Thank you, Governing Board members and members of Cabinet. I believe there was an attachment. Okay, thank you for this. So we've talked a little bit about the scheduling. We have already started working on schedules for next year. And annually, we bring to the board the elective courses. It's the board who approves the courses that are being offered. Of course, the core content coursework is offered, and these are the existing Madison elective courses. They're in alphabetical order, but they're not grouped like by signature program or by theme. They're just in alphabetical order, just for ease of review. So there are no additions or deletions to the list from the previous year. We just felt that because with the pandemic, and usually this is part of the consent agenda, we would bring it back forward as an action item just to give the public that opportunity to view. One thing I know Casey George, our Director for Signature Programs, has been really proud of is that Madison #1, our Visual and Performing Arts signature, it offers more elective choices than any middle school in the state. And so you can see the wide variety of opportunities that our students have. And I do want to point out that just because they're on the list does not mean that every school offers them. Some of them are specific to signature programs at each of the schools, and then some of them are based on teacher availability for different coursework. But we do bring it forward tonight just for board review and approval so that the schools can start their master scheduling planning.
Ms. Thompson.
Before I make a motion to approve the list, I'd just like to suggest, first of all, it's a really incredibly impressive list of Encore and elective courses that we have, but I think it would be helpful, not just for the board, but for the public to have something broken down by, if it's coded in some way, to show where they're offered. I think that, I've heard some questions from parents trying to make decisions about what middle school to send their kids, not understanding whether there's arts programs at, what arts programs are at Park versus what's at #1 versus what's at, being offered. They know what's being offered at their own school, but other schools, and I think it could be tremendously helpful to have one document where you could see all of that. But this presentation looks fine to me. And with that, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the list as presented.
Before we move to approve, is there other discussion or questions? I do have one. And we go outside of Robert's Rules of Order so that we get the discussion in case we need to modify something. But related to your question there, this is for the schools to start selecting. So as of this point, we have what they've done in the past, but we don't know what they'll be doing specifically for next year. Is that correct?
That is correct. With board approval, the principals will know that these are allowable electives that they can offer, and they will start to work with their teachers to see which teachers are available for the different courses and plan their master schedules accordingly. And then to Member Thompson's point, we would then very easily be able to create a list by middle school so that the parents would be able to see the electives that are offered for next year.
Yeah. So, and I do have a question. So through that scheduling process, creating the master schedule for schools, that a school wanted to do something that didn't fit within one of these categories, would that just become a club then, or how would that be handled? Would they come back?
It would depend on when a school knew they wanted that. Certainly, if there was enough time to bring forward to the governing board an addition, we would be able to do that. I will tell you that all of these courses meet the requirements. There's a course catalog that the Department of Education puts out, and without that connection to the course catalog, the students do not qualify for the instructional minutes requirement for elementary school, including middle school, that K-8. So these are all aligned to that course catalog, so they meet the requirements for the state of Arizona to count as courses. And then to your point, President Holcomb, if a school, a teacher had an innovative idea for a new elective, as long as there was alignment to the course catalog and pending that we had time to bring it for board review and approval for next year, we would do so.
If I may, in practice, is that an issue of coming up with something that's not already on this list? Because I'd like to be able to give the administration the flexibility that if something came forward that that checked all the boxes as appropriate, that not having to come wait on scheduling, finalizing a schedule on board approval.
I will tell you that we worked with the site administrators prior to bringing this to the board, so they've had the opportunity to review the list as well as the course catalog so that they can talk with their teachers about any additions. At this point, none of the schools felt that they would be adding any additional courses, and that's why I said there are no changes to what was in a previous year. We have had years where there have been additions, and usually Casey George has presented to the governing board so that you would have an overview of what those courses are and what they would contain.
Okay, and I appreciate that process. I know getting the schedule in is critical, and sometimes is pushed some time. And in my professional practice, we have motions where we give discretion to the administration to be able to do those things and come back for ratification, so you don't have to wait. And if that were an issue, I'd be entertaining a motion to that, but it doesn't sound like that's going to be an issue this year. But I'd be willing to consider that if you thought that was appropriate.
Certainly, we would appreciate that if time was of the essence. For example, if a new hire came on board that had something that they could offer that's not already approved, having that flexibility could be very helpful.
So with that, I would propose, if I may, I would propose a motion that we approve this, I got the wrong one, the electives, the Encore elective course manual as presented, and also delegate the authority to the superintendent that if another course is suggested that meets the requirements of state and can be properly, properly utilized for class time, that you have the authority to do that, and the board will delegate that authority so that we don't have any time instances, issues. Ms. Spear.
I'm not so sure I support that, only in the interest of making sure, I mean, if there's a time issue, we meet very regularly. We don't find ourselves in a situation where we're not able to get an action item done. I think unless there has been a consistent issue, I don't know if this is appropriate, considering that we should probably make sure that this is part of a board agenda if there are new classes coming, just for transparency's sake.
And that's why I bring this up for discussion. That's a legitimate issue. I'm comfortable with the delegate because I have whatever the administration would bring to us after it's already been vetted and they have a teacher who's willing to do it. I'm comfortable with that, but I understand your concern. So, yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would just chime in that. So most of these are pretty broad, and I think that the teachers are able to, they might be creative with what they're teaching, but they still fit into these categories. So kind of going along with what Ms. Spear said, it would have to be a pretty unique program for us to need to approve it anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong with that. So I think if we need to vote on it, it should be fine. And then
Okay.
On the up and up.
And my motion doesn't go forward unless there's a second. It doesn't sound like I'm going to get a second, and I'm perfectly okay with that. So, Ms. Thompson, you were proposing a motion, unless you want to second mine.
Move to approve as presented.
And I will second that.
Okay, it's moved by Ms. Thompson, seconded by Ms. Spear. Any further discussion? Okay, please vote. And that passes unanimously. That brings us to the discussion regarding future meetings.
So we will be very busy in March because we are really getting into the season where we're doing the work this year and we're planning for the work next year. So on the March 7th meeting, we will have another choir performance as requested, Board Member Kazi. And then we will have an instructional coach update. So important for the board to understand and hear the work that the coaches are doing to support the teachers. March 28th is when things are really going to get going. We'll have a You Make a Difference, Shining Star, and a Meadows Showcase. But this is when we will have Madison Highland Prep Annual School Report. We will also have interest-based negotiations and Budget Advisory Committee recommendations. And before that, we will have an executive session to talk about interest-based negotiations and budget advisory. So then also we are going to be inviting some of the administrators that you approved today as recognitions. So we can meet the new principal of Madison #1 and congratulate the new interim principal and assistant principal of Park. And then quickly in April, that is when I will bring forward the superintendent budget recommendations based on interest-based negotiations and budget advisory. So we will also be bringing our salary schedules, our administrative contracts, the ranges, the extra duty days, and the classified staff contracts. So March and beginning of April will be very busy time.
Any other questions or comments about the upcoming schedule? It's going to get busy. One thing, and maybe this is more appropriate for the weekly report, we have put our contracts out, correct? For teachers. It'd be nice to be tracking, the return, to the extent, if we could, and maybe that's appropriate for the weekly report. If not for a meeting information item. Right. Anything else? Right. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Ms. Kazi. Moved by Ms. Kazi and quickly seconded by Ms. Spear. Please vote.
We want our cake.
There's cake.
I shut the window. I vote aye, if I could explain my vote.
All those in favor say bye. We laugh too much for such serious stuff.
I know. It's like, am I under? I didn't bring the jacket today. I gotta bring the jacket. I am eating cake now because my kids will see this and they will eat it.
Well, my family tends to eat all the food before I get home.
I'm not gonna save them any. They have all the